I now welcome in person a representative from the TAFE Directors Australia. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, will you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear here today?
Thank you. My name is Jenny Dodd. I'm the Chief Executive for TAFE Directors Australia, which is a small peak body for the TAFEs.
I'll now invite you to make a short opening statement. At the conclusion of any remarks, I'll invite members of the committee to ask questions.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present to this inquiry into free TAFE this morning. I acknowledge and pay my respects to the Ngunnawal elders past and present and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in the room or online today. Yuma. In my opening comments, I want to tell you 5 stories. Before I do, I just want to begin by sharing a little of my own background. From 2014 to 17, I worked for TAFE Queensland, where we partnered strongly with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. I also felt firsthand the impact of the enormous distances that define Queensland. I went to Queensland, having worked for 20 years here in Canberra. Then from 2018 to 2020, I was part of Tasmania as the CEO of TAFE. In that context, I experienced the low educational attainment of many Tasmanians and the critical role TAFE plays in growing Tasmania's own workforce to meet its skills shortages. These are not just stories for me. The lives of these students I'm going to share with you could be any number of students who enter TAFEs. Free TAFE has been life-changing for many. Free TAFE is also developing the skills of many, many Australians and making a difference to the economies of our states and territories. So let me begin firstly with the story of Annette from Mackay's Torres Strait Islander community. Annette says the opportunity of having fee-free nursing courses has been a true blessing, making this endeavour possible for me. Annette said she believes strongly that more First Nations representation was needed in the health sector. She says, I embarked on this journey to upskill and pursue nursing to make a difference within my community. This, I believe, is crucial in bridging the gap and ensuring better outcomes for our people. And Annette also believes that studying and skilling as a sole parent is a model for her 4 sons. Let's now turn to Karen. Prior to studying, Karen was a stay-at-home single mum of 5. Karen is a North Queenslander who sees the opportunity of the Cert 3 in Conservation and Ecosystem Management. In Karen's words, I'd wanted to study conservation for ages, but it was full fee, which put me off. My friends kept telling me I should become a park ranger, but anything I was interested in doing was only available down south and too expensive. When free TAFE was announced, I had another look online. It was one of the courses, so I jumped on it. There's no way I would have been able to study without the funding. Karen is now employed by a local ecological restoration specialist. TAFE really has been life-changing. It's opened so many doors for me, and for that I am so grateful. And turning to Tasmania, let's talk about 2 young men, Max and Michael, who have used fee-free TAFE to get started into a new career, developing much-needed skills in Tasmania and really forging forward for young people. Max and Michael both studied a Certificate 2 in Engineering Pathways at TAFE's Allan Vale campus. Max came to the course for the next step in his education following finishing high school. Meanwhile, Michael grew up around a father who does a fair bit of welding. They were both keen to get a start in the industry. Both Max and Michael said the course being free went a long way to helping them apply, and they completed the Certificate 2. As a result of their success, they both quickly earned apprenticeships in the metals industry. And then there is 21-year-old Jack from South Australia. Jack is studying the Cert 3 in Early Childhood Education and Care at TAFE SA. Jack is 21 and says his decision to commit to full-time study in the vocational education sector was made easier by receiving a place as part of fee-free TAFE. This was one of the 4,000 places available to assist South Australians to retrain or upskill, especially in skill shortage areas such as early childhood. Jack says studying requires such a time commitment, so it's good to know the fee is taken care of and I can focus on the course. Jack also acknowledges that he has needed extra help because he has ADHD and says he has been impressed with the support service available to students at TAFE SA and the amazing lecturers. Lastly, but by no means least, from Victoria there is Laura. Laura was a fee-free TAFE diploma student at Chisholm Institute of TAFE who won the Ramsay 2024 Student Cadet of the Year. Laura was chosen from 150 fellow nursing cadets nationwide to win this prestigious award. Laura was accepted into Ramsay's cadetship during her Diploma of Nursing and completed placements at 3 Victorian private hospitals. She was quickly selected for a graduate position at Ramsay's Peninsula Private Hospital, only a month after completing her cadetship there. Before starting nursing studies at Chisholm Institute in 2023, Laura had worked at Australia Post for 15 years. She says, "As I approached my 40s, my interest in work that would help others in community grew. This passion inspired my transition into nursing. Going back to school has been a transformative experience, enabling me to connect with a supportive community of peers and mentors." In summary, free TAFE is government funding to public institutions TAFE for public good. Free TAFE makes a difference to individuals, to their life circumstances, to their careers, to their communities and families. Free TAFE is about opportunities for those disadvantaged in education and from equity backgrounds. It demonstrates that removing barriers of fees and enabling qualification attainment enables better jobs. Free TAFE also is contributing to building the skilled workforce of every state and territory. Therefore, free TAFE should continue. Thank you.
Good, thanks very much. Senator Brockman.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair, I lost my voice there for a second. Can you just confirm with respect to your organisation its structure and funding pathways? Like how does it work in terms of the TAFEs across Australia? Is every TAFE a member? And how does information, decisions, money flow upwards to you?
So TDA is a small peak body. There are 3 staff, myself and an administrator here in Canberra and one other member of staff who's located in Queensland. We're funded solely through the TAFEs themselves. They pay a membership fee. All TAFEs are members of ours. We have a board. That board consists of a representative from the TAFE, a TAFE representative from each jurisdiction. So when you look at the large jurisdictions where there's been single TAFEs like New South Wales, it's the Managing Director who's the board member. South Australia, it's the CEO who's the board member. Same with TAFE Queensland, where it's the board member. In Victoria, where we have 12 TAFEs and 4 dual sectors, they have an election process and they select their representative who then joins the board. But all 8 jurisdictions have a representative on the TAFE Directors Australia board.
And is it just the size of the TAFEs that determine how much a financial contribution they make?
It was formed in 1998 when there were many TAFEs, and it was a place, its title is TAFE Directors Australia. So it was formed as a place for directors of TAFEs to be able to have that liaison and connection with one another. Over time, of course, it's morphed as an organisation into some slightly different purposes. But the contribution from the different TAFEs is based on their student numbers, roughly their geographical distribution, etc. So TAFE New South Wales is one TAFE, is a significant contributor. Once you start breaking that down, I was the CEO of TAFE at the time, much less. So yes, it's relative according to. It's broadly based on student numbers and how they function.
And is that the sole funding source? Do you have other
so
partnerships?
So the other funding source we get, and we work hard at this, is through corporate affiliates. So we limit our corporate, because we're such a small team, we limit our corporate affiliates to 7 or 8, and we are fully got 7 corporate affiliates at the moment. And corporate affiliates, they actually pay for one of the staff members, essentially, or best part of that. So those corporate affiliates are people such as Technology One, ReadyTech, people who are in the ecosystem of TAFE. We have a very strong network influence, and I get a zillion vendors coming to me saying, can we get to your TAFEs? And the answer is no. You have to be a corporate affiliate of TDA to work with us in a partnering arrangement. And then what happens with the corporate affiliates, they work with us through thought leadership. So can I give you an example? ReadyTech, who's one of the big student management system suppliers, was a sponsor of one of our TAFE Talks webinars last week. We had nearly 500 people who registered for that. Most were TAFE, but many were others. They and TAFE SA did a thought leadership presentation on the changing nature of apprenticeships and the changing management structure required to be able to deliver to apprenticeships. So that's the sort of relationship we build with them. It's not about selling their product, it's about brand recognition, partnership, and their contribution to the thought leadership of vocational education and training in Australia.
And just roughly, I don't expect an exact figure, but I mean, is it a third of your income derives from those corporate affiliates?
No, it wouldn't be
10%?
It varies a little. Corporate affiliates are really interested in working with us when we have a TDA convention because that accrues a large number. We don't run a TDA convention every year. Okay. So just at the moment, we had a convention in 2024, the next one will be in 2026. So at the moment we've got a special deal going for our corporate affiliates, which is 2-year membership, because we haven't got as much to offer them in their partnership response. So they don't accrue for anywhere near a third or anything like that, but they are an important revenue source for us, but they're also an important partnership source for us. So Adobe's a partner, and that sort of opportunity to mix with the not always large, but predominantly large. My Equals is a partner. Desire to Learn, which is a learning management system, as a partner. They see the benefit of being able to support us. We are very clear. This is not a sales job for you. This is a partnership opportunity. And those partnerships are very strong. And most of them, Tech One's been a corporate affiliate of ours for over 10 years. We've really grown the program since I took over 3 years ago, or 3.5 years ago, and we've grown the corporate affiliate program to increase our revenue. It was a commercial decision, but also to ensure we had that voice of our vendors, our commercial partners, in the space in which TAFEs play.
What data, what information do you collect from your members when it comes to TAFE particularly?
So it's not actually really our role, Senator, and we don't see it as our role. Our role is to be a network body for our members. As you know, the TAFEs, not the dual sectors, but the TAFEs are state or territory government owned. Yes. Therefore, their chief executives are members of the public service of their state or territory government, and their reporting mechanism is through to their state training authorities. That's where they report data. At TDA, our role is to talk about the issues that they are encountering. So let me give you an example in the context of today. When Free TAFE was first announced, not the Victorian one, which had been going for some time, but the one that went national, we formed a network of the senior leads in all the TAFEs who were responsible for the implementation. Our thinking at the time was to stand that network up for 6 months so that they could share, because for many of those TAFEs, they had to move very, very quickly, and a lot of the announcements, if you take the Northern Territory, for example, was announced around the second last week of December, had to be in place by January for enrolment. So very, very quick arrangement. So we formed that network to be able, so they could talk with each other about how they were in their own states and territories implementing the program and learn from each other. So TAFE SA, for example, was a little bit ahead of the pack because they had been the first announcement. So they had a really clear data tool that they started to share through Power BI with each other so that the others could understand how they were recording it. Our role in that was to facilitate. We don't record data, and clearly we keep an eye on it in the way that others do, but we don't ask for data from our TAFEs. The sorts of things that network did do, though, was have conversations about where enrolments were, where withdrawals were, what were issues. So let me give you an example of that. In the first round of some of the fee-free TAFE funding, Certificate for Cybersecurity is one of the qualifications that many of the TAFEs and their jurisdictions put up. Skill shortage area, also really important for their economies in terms of how they wanted to develop and deepen the skills base. In that network, there was quite a bit of conversation amongst the TAFEs that for the target audience of these students, it was too hard. And it was a difficult qualification. So through their own conversations, some of them made decisions, we'll actually refocus to the Certificate 3 and make that possible for students. So they're the sorts of conversations. We had a lot of conversation around the wraparound services and how it was being used in the various states. And Tasmania, of course, had received quite significant wraparound services that they then applied through for their state training authority and what they were going to do with it, which we mentioned in our inquiry, which supported their very successful and critical foundation skills program. So that's...
So where do you get, I guess wondering where you get your information on the TAFE system as you do your advocacy, having been in different industry, but in your role in a previous life, information is very important in order to advocate on behalf. So what are your information sources then, if it's not coming directly from the TAFEs?
It is coming directly from the TAFEs, but we don't. Your question was, do we collect the data? We collect the general understanding of where they're going and what their issues are, but our role isn't to get them to report to us. To start with, they probably wouldn't, because we're a peak body. We're not. Their reporting line is to their state training authority.
Does that take the form of, is there something tangible that you could provide to the committee? Is there reports?
To us? No.
No. Okay.
So much of it is quality of conversations, much of it is through the networks. We also, as you're aware, the TAFEs are state-based and territory-based organisations, so a lot of the work that we do is working with the Department of Employment and Workplace Relation on their behalf. So some of my role, I sit on numerous committees run by the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations and the Department of Education. So, for example, this afternoon I'm on the University's Implementation Accord Committee in that voice of vocational education. So that's the role of the peak body, is to be able to do things that the TAFE CEOs living and working in states and territories can't do. That's our role in that national context. There's often a perception that we might be a data source. We're not really. We're a peak body that enables the networks, that speaks on their behalf and does a lot of advocacy for them about key issues. One of the pieces of advocacy we've done, a couple, just to give you an example where we've had success, is the self-accreditation for TAFE at the AQF Level 5. That's been a big part of our platform. We did a lot of advocacy through our network in nursing, where we pushed for the care minutes in aged care to recognise the enrolled nurse, and we got that changed, which was, sounds small, but we got a 4-hour recognition out of those legislative care minutes that could go to a diploma of nursing graduate and enrolled nursing. So they're the sorts of things that we advocate for. We have been strongly advocating for Commonwealth supported places in higher education, and we've got through that Accord Implementation Committee a commitment to a number of those for 2026. So they're the issues. So when looking at the data, that's not our role. We're an issues-based peak body management for our TAFEs.
So no formal reporting.
No.
On free TAFE to you. One of the reasons cited by the government only funding TAFE is training quality. I think that would be fair to say. Through the reporting you hear back from your TAFEs on the ground, that anecdotal process, can you provide any instances across the TAFE network where there have been discussions of quality not meeting standards?
So TAFEs have a strong commitment to quality, and it is about setting a quality bar that actually meets those standards, but actually exceeds those standards. So the AUSPar self-assurance program that is now in place is around how TAFEs will work towards, TAFEs and all RTOs will work towards self-assurance of meeting the standards. That is a commitment right across the TAFE network, that's our role. Our role is to drive towards high-level quality outcomes. Now, there will always be individual isolated examples which can be brought forward, whether you're talking to me or whether you're talking to the private training providers, that demonstrate an individual may have not had the best experience. That's going to happen regardless of what organisation you exist in. But by and large, the quality commitment by TAFE is exemplary. It's committed to the fee TAFE as being an opportunity for those who are disadvantaged. And what that has meant, they've had to put significant support services to enable those students to participate in learning environments, which to some extent many of them have not been familiar with. And if you look at Jack, whose little snippet I gave you, Jack talks about his amazing lecturers in early childhood from TAFE SA.
Senator Grogan.
What a great segue there into the amazing TAFE SA. I'm a big fan from South Australia. You started talking there about some of the supports in TAFE. Now, obviously, one of the big benefits of TAFE is that it does provide those wraparounds. Can you just step us through that difference in how TAFE operates and enables students who are maybe going to find it tougher to make that transition, how they help build that success?
Yep, very happy to do that, because I think it is the defining thing about TAFE that, first of all, we work to industry, we deliver to industry, but we're an educational organisation that is there for the whole person. So TAFEs will have, and this will vary a little depending on the state or territory within which they operate, they will have Indigenous support officers, they will have disability support officers, they will have counsellors, that's all TAFEs have counsellors. They will have a range of people supporting, say, international students in their pastoral care processes. So they will have a whole range of support. They have libraries where students go. They have support structures. So I was in Tasmania as the CEO when COVID hit. And one of the things that we knew was real was that we had a large percentage of women who were our students, and when everything had to shut down and they had to go home, it was their families and their children that got access to the computers, not them. And they didn't get that access. So we started gradually to open our libraries under a booking system to enable the students to come in, and we supported them with computers and people who could help them use computers. I think that they're examples of the broad range of structures. In Tasmania, where the educational attainment and the digital literacy and the literacy and numeracy is some of the lowest in the country, there was an enormous commitment to foundation skills and how those support structures work to enable a student to be able to be successful. When I was on the Gold Coast in Tasmania, Diploma of Nursing students was a huge part of our cohort, and we put in place a tutoring program that enabled those students to have those extra academic supports. For the electrotechnology students, this is not free TAFE, but this is more broadly, we employed a maths teacher, and the maths teacher was there to be able to help the students get the gap between what they'd exited school with and what that very complicated and challenging qualification required. So they're the educational decisions we will make. They're the life support decisions we'll make. And I think that they're absolutely fundamental to the way in which we work, in particular for these vulnerable cohorts. This isn't just about coming in and studying. This is about learning skills that will equip you for life and learning how to be a learner, how to do things in a different way than you've done before, and along the way getting a qualification or at least a skill set that's going to make you more employable.
Thank you. So fee-free TAFE, obviously we've been looking at this for some time, and we've heard a lot of evidence of the value and the not just to the students, but more broadly in terms of our skills crisis and such like, and how that's going to help. In terms of the kind of investment and support structure that we see in TAFE, are there other things that you see as being put towards TAFE that are improving the circumstances? Any other sort of funding structures or support structures from state, territory or federal government?
Well, I think it's a very different program, but it's an absolutely critical one for the country, and that is the TAFE Centres of Excellence. And the development of TAFE Centres of Excellence, and we now have about 9 that are announced, are absolutely about where those critical industries need change. Now, these are quite, they're absolutely innovative, and they're absolutely driving different thinking in our TAFEs. Let me talk about the Canberra Institute of Technology TAFE Centre of Excellence, because it was one of the first announced. It's looking at electric vehicles. So the role that TDA has played in that is working with Canberra Institute of Technology to get a network of electric vehicle educators from other TAFEs around the country. We have those networks. We get them to the table. What they're now doing is sharing resources with each other across the country to be able to become more efficient and more effective in the delivery of what is essentially a new industry for our TAFEs. It's that level of innovation that's occurring very broadly in terms of this National Skills Agreement. And the TAFE Centres of Excellence have actually very much inspired TAFEs in that get out there and do some really great things with industry. The partnerships are strong with industry. The partnerships are strong with universities starting to come into play. So if you look at a couple of the TAFE Centres of Excellence that are coming out of Queensland, they've done a call very broadly for university partners, and not all of them are in Queensland. So they're looking at where they've got university partners that are strong in the areas that they're delivering. New South Wales, similarly, has got 3 TAFE Centres of Excellence in advanced manufacturing. These are really important developments for the country, of which our public provider is well positioned to be able to deliver on what is essentially critical change process that will lead us into being a more stable and successful Australian economy. The last one announced was the Defence TAFE Centre of Excellence, only announced last week. It will draw, WA, but it will draw across the country because defence is so important and will bring in so many of the other TAFEs. Is that the sort of example you were looking for?
Yeah, yes, it is. That's really great to hear that they're providing such leadership in industry areas that are so critical. Maybe you could tell me that there was a comment which has been repeated significantly from Susan Ley about the fact that if you don't pay for things, you don't value them. She said that in relation to fee-free TAFE. Would you say that the students across TAFE, the lecturers across TAFE, would agree with that statement? Do you think that the free courses within TAFE are less valuable and not worth it?
I think these stories that I started with demonstrate that all of those students, and that's just a snippet of the hundreds of students, have valued the opportunity and have valued it enormously, in part because it was free. I am sure most people in this room today are well educated, and we've had opportunities, all of us, to be highly successful. I think one of the things that TAFE do, and walking through the doors of TAFE, are those who have not been advantaged in education or in economic pursuit. If you can change that dial for one of those people by giving them some education for which they might not have done it. If you look at these stories, 2 of these students were women who were sole parents. If you've got an $1,800 debt to do a course, it might not seem much to many of us. But if you've got 3 children or 4 children to clothe, to get to school, and your ongoing costs as well, rent, etc., that's a big decision you've then got to make. Do you put it there or do you put it here? If we can move many of those women into, give them skills and give them hopefully qualifications that will get them into employment, that is change for the economy. And that's what we know that the University Court is also trying to do, is bring those equity groups in. No teacher in TAFE would ever think that a student doesn't value the course in any way, other than it might not be right for them or their life chances get in the way. But in terms of valuing it, you don't have to pay to value it. That statement, and with great respect to Susan, and I think she has also made some good statements about the importance of skills and the criticality of skills, but that statement often comes from a point of privilege where we can pay. And I have seen in my career so many who can't.
Thank you, that's really helpful. In your submission, you also talk about funding certainty and protection against any future government taking different pathways. And we know in the past that TAFE has had a spotty history in terms of support from previous governments, which have been highly problematic in terms of sustainability. What impact do you think legislating the free TAFE is going to have, and what do you think would be the risk of not legislating it?
So as a TAFE CEO, legislating it will mean that the decisions I can make now in terms of my teaching workforce, I can commit to them for permanency and lifelong careers. I can commit to them to become educators that allow them to do more than just have a 2 or 3 year contract, that allow them to grow as educators and ultimately to become leaders within our public education organisations. That's the difference. I can't do that if I'm a CEO at the moment with short-term funding. And that's been a problem for a long, long time. This is a critical bill to creating that certainty. I've lived through, in my career in TAFE, the changes that have occurred. And I've seen what were organisations that were able to give commitment to people for long-term careers go through this incredible cycle of cuts and changes and the broader marketisation decisions that were made. And that is not a negative comment I'm making, I've just seen it. Unable to, if you haven't got the ability to predict the future, then and have some certainty over that funding, then you won't be able to make some of those really important decisions around how you offer programs and where you employ your staff. One of the biggest issues, if you ask TAFE CEOs what keeps them awake at night, one of the biggest issues for them still is how do I get the qualified teachers in my organisation? This will help solve that. This will help get those qualified teachers there, because you are able to say to them, here's a permanent opportunity to be a part of the workforce. When I was in Tasmania, we could not get plumbing teachers. We introduced a program that, because as you would all know, you have to hold the Certificate for Training and Assessment to be able to teach. We introduced a program that went through merit selection, but a person could apply and they would be confirmed permanent on application. They had 12 months then to do their Certificate for Training and Assessment with guidance and with reduced teaching hours. If they got it within 12 or 18 months, they rolled to permanency without another application. That changed the dial because it was because the reduction in salary often for some of those critical trades to come and teach is a big decision, and it's an even bigger decision if you don't have permanency.
Yeah.
Now, the second part of your question was, or have I covered the whole question?
I think you've given a good flavour. I think it's really just that risk. If we don't legislate this, what's the risk? And I think you've covered that in terms of workforce within the TAFEs and various other things. In terms of students looking ahead and thinking about pathways, do you see any benefits there?
I think what we've had in vocation, I sat here in one of these inquiries about the perception of VET last year, and the perception of VET has been eroded because of the changing nature of how we actually structure VET. If we want to change the perception of VET, especially for young people, we have to do a body of work to give it stability. And we have a body of work to do with our school students. And those two young men from Tasmania, I can see their faces now as they're not your high flyers who are going to come in and necessarily have high ATARs, but they're going to be great employees and do great things in their lives and have really satisfying lives because they get skills and qualifications. We have to change the dial around the perception of vocational education, and certainty around a program like Free TAFE is going to help with that, helping our young people to see this is here. We've had an intergenerational asset of TAFE that's been around for well over 100 years. This commitment reinforces that brand and its sustainability.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Senator O'Sullivan. Thank you.
Chair. Thank you, Dodd. I'm actually a former TAFE student, did my apprenticeship and went to TAFE as part of that. Very proud of my TAFE education, and it did serve me well. I just wanted to place that on the record. You answered the last question of Senator Brockman in relation to quality. The question was, can you think of any instances where TAFEs haven't met the quality standards that are required? You weren't able to provide any instance that you're aware of. Can you think of any instances where industry training or private training providers deliver better training than TAFEs?
I'm not sure that the question that you're asking here is one that's for me to answer. I respect a lot of our private training providers. Our enterprise training providers, that have high levels of completions, so they should. The people who are employed in those enterprise training providers are there to learn skills and qualifications deliberately for their employer. So yes, they should have high levels of qualifications. They'll always have a certain degree of advantage for that industry because that employer has made the decision to say that we want to really bespoke train using the national training system for those sorts of people. So that will of course occur in some instances. I think that there are also some in our Aboriginal communities, there will be RTOs that are really well positioned to be able to do some great training. And there will be many examples of that. I've gone from the enterprise RTO to the community-based RTO. We're a big system. We've got 4,000 training providers in this system. 29 of them only are TAFEs. TAFE is the public education provider. We're very broad brush. We have hundreds of qualifications on scope. We have thousands of students. Our role is to educate and enable. Our role is to give those first opportunities and to work, through my example of TAFE Centres of Excellence, in the innovation space with employers and industry. It's a multi-layered system. So I don't really want to get into this is better than that or that's better than this, because it is about the different purpose. We're a for-purpose educational organisation.
And my question really goes to, you've answered it, that it is your job to come here and advocate on behalf of TAFE. That's the very purpose of your organisation and why you exist. And just like any other industry body or union or any other representative body, they come here and their job is to advocate, obviously, for the best interests of their members. And you're certainly doing that this morning, and I congratulate you for that. So therefore, you wouldn't actually come in here and say, "Well, give TAFEs less money," would you?
Of course not.
Of course not.
It's a complex business running a TAFE. It's a complex business delivering to students who might have low advantage in education. It's a complex business enabling a very broad mix of a teaching population, from hairdressers to creative arts to plumbers to electricians. That's the melting, that's only the tip of the iceberg. That's a melting pot of a TAFE workforce. It's a complex business. It needs to have certainty of funding. It needs to have good funding. If we broaden the conversation into higher education, there's a big conversation in this country to be had about equity of funding across vocational education and higher education, about what we're trying to achieve in the whole skills agenda. This piece of legislation is about the public education provider in vocational education. For some reason, we never question the role of the public education provider in secondary education or the role of universities. We might question some of the governance of universities, but not their role. This is about the public education provider. It's about making it strong, making it the anchor institutions it is, giving it certainty, enabling students who understand the brand of TAFE, where it's low entry, it's an easy entry pathway with teachers who get it, to come in and have that first chance. That's what this one's about.
As senators, we get representations from many different community groups and interests across our communities. I'm in Western Australia, recently had a women's safety organisation that provides tremendous support to people. Now, their funding programs are 2 years or 3 years, and that cycle is they say is difficult to deal with. Like, why should TAFE be provided any more certainty than a service provider that's providing really vital services to helping out some of our most vulnerable Australians?
Because we are the public educator. We are for purpose, not for profit, state-owned or territory-owned, and we're there to serve the economy of those states and territories. That recognition of public education as the anchor for vocational education is so critical. With that certainty, there will be lots of opportunities. We are also the provider that delivers in critical industries at a level that others don't. And plumbing, electric technology, diploma of nursing, these are some critical industries where there are critical skill shortages. Being able to attract and retain a workforce in those industries through being able to offer them ongoing commitment. Being able to develop TAFE Centres of Excellence for the future. These are not just going to be a couple of year programs. These are going to have longevity going forward. That's the reason why, because we're the public education provider.
I've also had contact from many in the community in relation to the name of Fee Free TAFE as a program, or as a, I'd say a bit of a marketing slogan, because what they say is that when they actually front up, it's not always free, because the associated costs, the textbooks, the other associated costs that are required to be able to complete the course are not covered under Fee Free TAFE. So when we talk about the affordability question, and you've raised, you gave some anecdotes about people that you say it's helped them be able to afford their training, but for if you've got those associated costs not covered under Fee Free TAFE, then it's obviously that there's no change there. Yet under the existing system, you could hex the tuition costs, and so there's no actual change in terms of upfront costs, is there?
Well, a conversation around HEX is a completely different conversation. I don't want to play there, because I don't think that is the right decision for these vulnerable cohorts. There will always be some incidental costs. Some of the states will work through how to cover some of those through other mechanisms. Some of them will make other decisions. If you look at the question asked by Senator Grogan about the support structures, they're not charged. They're absolutely part of the package that a student receives. If there's incidental costs in a piece of equipment because you're going to do a Certificate 3 in cookery, then that may occur. But I don't think we should get hung up on that, because if the big cost of the fees is not there, then some of that is quite small.
Hence the name, Fee Free.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so just on the technical elements of the bill, what's your understanding of how the existing Fee Free TAFE agreements are funded between the Commonwealth and state governments? And how does this bill actually amend that?
This bill extends that as opposed to amends it. So the current arrangement...
So it's able to happen now, right?
Sorry?
It's happening now.
Yes, it's happening now under the National Skills Agreement.
We have Fee Free TAFE courses being offered now.
Yes, and it's under the National Skills Agreement.
Yes.
That those courses. But they will finish in 2026. This bill is about the extension and commitment of 100,000 places into the future. That's the sustainability decision. That's the sustainability for the TAFEs in terms of becoming public educators. It's also the sustainability for the perception of students, and it's sustainability for employers and industry.
Does this bill put in place anything that cannot be done already?
This bill is future-looking. This bill is lifting the profile of TAFE back to be the anchor institution of vocational education.
So why are we not having a commitment of through legislation around women's safety or legal aid or any number of programs? Well, I mean, why this?
I think there may well be an argument for having a commitment for some of those things, Senator.
Sure, it's done through the budget. It's a decision of government, isn't it, at any time?
Why this? Because education and we live in a skills shortage environment, and which we have done for some time now. The constant change of policy in the vocational education and space has been, I'm sure, Senator, you've seen some of the work of Claire Field, where she talks, and I can't reel it off the top of my head, but the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of policy and legislative change that has occurred in vocational education and training, especially when you compare it with the other two education sectors, has been mammoth. This gives certainty. This removes policy change and removes the likelihood at the end of 2026 there will be a change. This makes a commitment that we are going to refocus public education as a critical part, not the only part, but as a critical part and a central part of our vocational education and training
on that
system.
confidence that you say this bill provides, the EM, the explanatory memorandum of the bill, notes that there is no financial impact relating to the bill. Yet it purports to make Fee Free TAFE permanent. So can you explain from your perspective how this bill can make Fee Free TAFE permanent but also have no financial impacts?
Well, the arrangement and your question really will need to be directed to my colleagues in the government, not so much to me, but let me explain to you from my perspective what that might look like. There has been a state and territory agreement around vocational education and training forever. It is about how money moves. So that commitment is already made. It's actually about how that moves into the future funding in terms of the priorities for the states and territories around that relationship with the Commonwealth. So I'm not privy to the financial component, so I will ask you to refer that question to others in the public service. But that would be my understanding. It's already there. It's part of the way the states and territories fund vocational education and training.
Okay, so you're, and I appreciate that you might not be able to do this, but you can't sit here and point to any aspect in the bill that actually gives that guarantee.
Financially, it wouldn't be my role to make that statement, Senator.
You're able to come here and say that, you know, this is a good thing and we should pass it.
Absolutely, because I see the students' faces in front of me.
Sure.
I see, and I have lived the disruption that TAFEs have had to have over time for constant policy change. I've sat there with tearing my hair out as a CEO of TAFE. How am I going to get teachers? How am I going to attract teachers highly paid in the construction industries into TAFE when all I can offer them is a 2-year contract and a drop in salary? They're the big challenges that TAFEs have had to confront. This bill helps remove some of those challenges, and that's multi-layered.
Okay, I'm out of time.
Good. Thanks very much. Just a very quick question from me before I hand over to Senator Brown, who's very patiently waiting. It does also seem to me you've outlined the advantage for the education system, and I know when you say that you're not saying about the processes and the organisation, you're saying about the organisation that delivers for community. It would seem to me that students also get a real opportunity. I recall thinking back when I was thinking about what I was going to do. You know, when you want to be a fireman or you want to be a police officer. I always wanted to be a union official, but I'm a bit strange. Here I ended up here, heaven forbid. But when you're in your 13, 14, and you're saying you're thinking about, well, what am I going to do when I go to 9 and 10 finish, maybe 11 and 12, what I do then. Knowing there's fee-free TAFE, and also advising and being advised by your parents about what you should do or what you could do, your teachers, career advisors. I mean, having that certainty does require some, back to Senator O'Sullivan's point about making sure there's projected certainty about the future. So you can actually make some real decisions as you're maturing and make that final decision about, will I test this out? Does that just seems a pretty humane, practical and sensible thing to do, as well as a damn good program?
I think what you're hitting on here, Senator, is the importance of aspiration. And I think in many families from less advantaged backgrounds, and I certainly lived it in Tasmania, aspiration may not have been something, especially in education, that they thought was for them. And yet this opportunity, and those 2 young men who did the Cert 2, that opportunity to say, there is no fee, that's a real leverage for a parent who might be aspirational to say, let's move, let's go to TAFE. Let's make TAFE equal in its prestige to going to university, and this removes one of those barriers and it creates aspiration.
Thank you. Senator Brown.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Ms Dodd, for coming along today. And I'd like to really thank you for presenting the examples that you have of real students and the appreciation they have and the opportunity they've had under free TAFE. You did it in your opening statement and all through your submission. I think it's really important for committee members to understand and hear the stories of people that are really achieving and having opportunities they may not have been able to take up before. So we've had this discussion around TAFE and RTOs, but I think it's pretty important that we put out in evidence what additional accountabilities that TAFE have to satisfy as the public education provider? And what role do you think TAFE plays in the vet system that the private sector does not?
Well, first off, TAFE is part of the state and territory economies. And one of the reasons the existing fee-free TAFE has been successful is that we haven't seen exactly the same courses offered in every single jurisdiction, because it's been about what those states and territories really need where they really need the skill shortages and where they really need to direct their applications for students to come and study. One of the roles of a CEO of a TAFE is to be absolutely part of those solution-driven conversations with their governments, regardless of which flavour of government it is. It's about the state economies. That's fundamental. That's a conversation that makes them a for-purpose provider for the economies for whom they work.
So TAFEs are subject to direct government oversight?
They are. Their operations can operate as a statutory authority, but they are subject to direct government oversight. They are an instrument of the government in helping the government of that state and territory achieve the outcomes it needs, in particular in skilling its population, in terms of making sure that its young people have pathways into education, in terms of making sure that the state has the adequacy of the skilled people they need to be able to perform all the multitude of things that are required for us all to live. That is a fundamental role of TAFE, and that makes it distinct from any other provider in this system. They're large organisations. Whether you look at TAFE New South Wales, that has nearly 400,000 enrolments, does about 70 to 80% of the apprenticeship training in New South Wales, and is recognised by the New South Wales government as a pivotal part of their economy, to Victoria that operates a different structure of TAFE with 12 TAFEs in full dual sectors. But the Victorians are highly networked and they're highly responsive to the government in Victoria. The system might look different in its execution, but it's the same purpose, it's the same construct really in what the purpose of TAFE is. And it's had years and years to do that. This is not new. They're not going to be here tomorrow and gone the next day. They've been with us for well over a century.
Thank you. And I notice in your submission you warn that expanding free TAFE beyond public TAFEs would be a risky policy in the market setting. And you also reference evidence that where government funding is extended to RTOs, not all will act in line with the policy intent. Can you talk us through that evidence and explain why it's important that public providers are the main deliverers of free TAFE?
I think the vocational education and training sector in Australia went through an incredible reputational loss because of the behaviour of some, not all, but some who went out for money as opposed to the purpose of what we do, which is education. And that was back in the vet fee help days, and a lot of that's now been tightened up. But more recently, last year, when AUSPar, through its regulatory behaviour, has had to look at over 17,000 qualifications that have been issued in some of these critical care and education industries and take them away from students because they haven't been adequately assessed. That speaks volumes about why it should remain with the public provider, who is responsible for making sure that its teachers are well qualified and do the correct learning and teaching and assessment that's required for students to have the competencies that they're required for those qualifications.
So how many students again were ripped off? How many? Did you say the number?
You'll have to look at the AUSPar website for the latest update, but about 17,000 out of the actions that AUSPar took in the final 6 months of last year.
Thank you. One last question from me, if the Chair's will let me do that. Your submission also goes on and identifies the limited use of the narrative that is being pushed by the BCA and ITECA that focuses on completions and non-completions as the primary measure of success. You reference an analysis done by Wybrow, Hall and Griffin that found some students don't complete a full qualification because they're enrolled in specific units to meet occupational or licensing needs and cease participating in training when they become employed. Can you talk us through and take us through your first-hand knowledge and experience of completions and what measures can be used to better understand student success?
Thank you. Completions are a really important outcome, and we will never walk away from that. A person who attains a qualification has some currency that gives them negotiating power and capabilities for the rest of their lives, and they can grow from that qualification to further education. And if you look at the NCVER data, TAFEs do much better on further education than any other RTOs or any other structures in terms of the students' progress through education. But completions are not the only measure. And the complex nature, we're not building a ship here where you have to finish it to launch it into the water. We're working with a person. And the person will make their own decisions about what their life chances are and what they want to be able to achieve. The best we can do for those people is to be able to put the support structures around them to help them get to that completion, or to recognise that what they enrolled in may not be the career for them and therefore transition. Let's remember they do have choice in this, and just because you might have enrolled in working in aged care or studying for aged care, when you do your first placement, you might work out that isn't for you. Now that's a shame because it's such a great industry and it's an industry in great need of skill shortages. But we are talking about people here and what they need for their lives. So this very binary conversation about completions fails to recognise the individual. It also fails to recognise the time frame in which we sit in this free TAFE environment, in that students, large percentage of them, if they're being taught and assessed appropriately, many of them will not have finished because a lot of them will also be part-time. So that sort of simple way of saying, therefore, we shouldn't continue is somewhat nonsense. Even in the apprenticeship world, we only have just over 50% completions. We've been running apprenticeships for forever. We've been trying to tackle this problem about completions for forever. We've got a new incentives coming in through the announcement by the government direct to the student, but we've also got a report there talking about how else we can change it. It's a complex discussion, completions. It's very complex. It's been with us forever. To suggest that that's the measure of success, especially for these vulnerable cohorts, is nonsense.
And given the cycle we're in with free TAFE, and the reporting cycle of the NCVR, it's what some of the data that we've been seeing is not complete.
Correct. I think it's important. The aspiration to complete is really important. I'm not diminishing it, and the support that's needed to enable students to complete is really important. But it's not the only measure of success. Every incremental bit of learning and success along the way that a student will have will make them more employable, will make them better able to contribute to the Australian economy and society.
And I can tell you there's lots of parents and students that would agree exactly with what you just said.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Good, thanks very much. And also as a proud, I went to TAFE to learn bar work and cellar work, which did me great stead in the hospitality industry in New South Wales. But thank you, Ms Dodd.
My pleasure.
We'll now have a short break until 10:15.